storyteller Jenny Lee brings you the spellbinding tales of Hannah Cranna.
My name is Jenny Lee, and today I'm going to tell you the story of Hannah Cranna, the Witch of Monroe. Everyone in Monroe knew that Hannah Cranna was a witch. Rumors of her witchery started when she was still a young and beautiful bride, and married to an old sea captain named James Hovey. Hovey died one summer in very mysterious circumstances, tumbling to his demise from a cliff he had walked thousands of times in broad daylight. The people of Monroe used to say Hannah must have put a curse of confusion on him. And from there, the rumors only grew, especially as Hannah herself grew from a beautiful young woman into a wrinkled old hag, the perfect picture of the witch they all knew her to be, with hair long, gray, and scraggly, with skin that hung from her face like curtains, with eyes pitch black. And the stories. Ooh. I heard tell of one woman from Monroe who it said was famous up and down the coast of New England for her delicious pies. One summer day, Hannah Cranna came up to this woman's window and asked her for a slice of her best pie. But the woman gave Hannah only the measliest little slice, and when Hannah asked for more, the woman flatly refused. Hannah turned away, muttering under her breath, and from that day forward, the woman couldn't get a decent pie out of the oven to save her life. Her crusts would come out black and cracked no matter how lovingly she attended them, and her fillings always turned to a sour sludge no matter how much sugar she added. Another story goes that one day Hannah found a young boy fishing in her creek without her permission, and again she muttered under her breath, and from that day forward, that boy could catch no fish, no matter what bait he used. But the worst was what she did to the sailors. Oh, Hannah hated sailors. It's said possibly because her own husband, whom she wasn't terribly fond of, was a sailor. Any time a ship would wreck on the shoals near New Haven, the people of Monroe knew Hannah Cranna must have gone down to the shore that night and muttered her curses and dragged the ships into the shallows where they wrecked upon the rocks. And afterwards, she would scurry about the wrecks, digging up all the gold and treasures she could from the hulls and bringing them back to her little cottage in the woods. It was soon said that the walls of Hannah Cranna's house were lined with gold. Now, making such a nuisance of herself as this wasn't long before the people of Monroe began to sit and wonder when that cranky old witch would finally lay down and die. And it was one cold winter when she finally obliged them. Hannah had a familiar, a huge black rooster named Old Boreas. And he was as hated in the town of Monroe as his mistress, for he was constantly making a nuisance of himself as well, always going about and pecking at ankles and scaring house cats and giving the loudest, most hideous shrieking crows. Well, one day, in the middle of winter, he clambered up to the top of the gate in front of Hannah's house, and he gave the 3 loudest, cruelest, shrieking crows he ever gave, and at the end of the 3rd, he fell over dead. And Hannah knew something. She made her way into town, and she opened the door of the meeting house, and she said to the bewildered people there, "In 3 days, I will die. And you must follow these instructions to the letter. I have no family to leave my riches to, and so if you follow my instructions, I will leave all the contents of my house to the good people of this town." Now the people knew that Hannah's house was lined with gold, and so they listened very carefully, and these were the instructions she gave. 1, you must bury me in the churchyard in a cedar coffin. 2, you must carry me to the churchyard on your shoulders, not on a cart or a sled. And 3, you must bury me before the sun sets the very day I die. And with that she walked out. And as she walked out, a snow began to fall, and it fell thick and deep for 3 days. And finally, on the 3rd day, as the snow stopped falling, Hannah Cranna fell over dead. Now the people of the town hurried to her house. It was late in the day when she died, and they knew they only had an hour or 2 of light left to bury her in the yard. So They brought the cedar coffin, and they started for the churchyard, but the snow was so thick and deep that they couldn't, for the life of them, walk Hannah Cranna to the churchyard with her coffin upon their shoulders as she wanted. They decided they would have to break one of her rules, and they placed her coffin on a sled, and they began to pull it out of the yard. But as soon as they got to the gate, where old Boreas 3 days earlier had fallen over dead, Hannah's coffin jumped off the cart and slid all the way down the garden path and slammed into her front door with a loud thump. The men quickly gathered up the coffin again and put it back on the sled and tried to pull it back toward the yard. And again, as soon as they got to the gate, that coffin jumped right off the sled and bumped straight into her front door again. 3 more times they tried this, and 3 times the same result, until finally they realized they would have to follow Hannah's instruction to the letter. And they hefted her coffin upon their shoulders, and they trudged all the way to the churchyard. But the time was already wasted. And when they finally laid the coffin to rest and said a quick prayer, the sun had long since set. Nothing terrible was happening so far, so they thought perhaps Hannah would be merciful and allow them the riches of her house, even though they hadn't buried her before the sunset. And they hurried back to her house as quickly as they could. But as they came, they saw Hannah's house engulfed in flames. A fire so hot that no snow or water would penetrate it. And all they could do was sit there and watch, and for 3 days that fire burned. And at the end of the 3 days, when it was finally cool enough to pick through the ashes, the townspeople scraped and clawed through the remains, trying to find any gold they could, but not one piece could be found. Were the rumors of gold always a myth? Or had Hannah played one last trick from beyond the grave? To this day in Monroe, no one knows. But you say the name Hannah Cranna anyone near New Haven, Connecticut, and you'll be met with a scowl and a curse, and a great gladness that that old witch finally breathed her last.
Thanks, Jenny. It's great to see the art of storytelling is alive and well. For more information about Jenny, visit the Northeast Storytelling website.